David Foster Wallace achieved more in his writing career than most of us could ever dream of doing. And today we are going to be hearing from Wallace himself on the price you are going to have to pay to become a great author. And I know David Foster Wallace ended up killing himself, but long before that, he made deliberate choices and double binds, as he calls them, to ensure his success as a writer. And so let's hear Wallace right now talk about the push for achievement as an author.
I think it's hard to talk smartly about it. It seems to me that most of the stuff in my own life and in my friend's life that's interesting and true involves double binds or setups where you're given two alternatives, each which are mutually exclusive, and the sacrifices involved in either seem unacceptable. I mean, one of the big ones is the culture places a huge premium on achievement. I mean, I went to like this real hoity-toity college, and as you know, and everybody's like now a millionaire on Wall Street. Anyway, how both to work hard enough and invest enough of yourself really to achieve something, and yet retain the sort of integrity so that you've got a self apart from your achievement. I mean, even something as banal as, you know, the modern woman can have it all. She can have a family and a deep, fulfilling relationship with her children while being, you know, a CEO of a successful company. I mean, it's as if the culture is some Zen teacher, you know, whacking us no matter what we do. It's very interesting.
And Wallace said this over 27 years ago, and it's more true today than it was back then, because the standard for achievement is much higher. Because, for instance, if you want to be a great writer in a lessening market, then you are going to have to be undeniably great. That's the only way to guarantee your success as a writer. And when we look back at the past, at your favorite authors, what did they have to give up to get there? And most likely, you are way behind them. Probably thousands, if not tens of thousands of hours behind already. And you are holding this fantasy in your mind of being a great author, of achieving this fame. But are you willing to do this? Because let me give it to you guys straight here. I don't believe that you can achieve in a career, be a good parent, and achieve your artistic dreams at the same time. Most people, 90% of the people in the world, hate their job, aren't good parents, and don't achieve any artistic dreams, or really any artistic merit. The same could be said for like spiritual merit and like a ton of other things. Most people are just mud people, golems, just kind of moving through life and not really achieving or striving for anything. And so when you look at your life, you're going to have to make deliberate choices. You're going to have to engage in these double binds that Wallace is talking about, because there have been a select few, the 3%, maybe less than that, who have worked a career, something that feels like a career, and been able to achieve their writing dreams at the same time. I think of two female authors who honestly pushed the limits, and they are the only really two people I know that did this. There's others like Gene Wolfe and stuff, but first of all, Toni Morrison, who started writing novels in her 40s, if I'm correct, would wake up early before work, and she had kids, wake up at like 3 or 4 a.m. and start writing. Same with this black science fiction author, Octavia Butler. She would wake up at 3 or 4 a.m. before work and did that for close to a decade before she found any writing success. And for Octavia Butler, I think that's why she died somewhat early from health complications, because, you know, waking up at 3 or 4 a.m. every day to grind out writing and then be taking care of a kid and working a very hard job, that is going to take a toll on you in the long run. And then if you want to add being a good parent on top of that, then it's almost impossible, because working, you know, if you have a typical job that's a 40-hour-a-week job, then in my opinion, you really can't be a good parent, because first of all, there is a fluctuating nature to parenthood, that some days your kid is just going to need you. Some days it's a beautiful day and you should be with them, but guess what? You only have 2 weeks off per year and you're going into work. Even if you're working remotely and you get to kind of see them and be with them, it's really not like that in terms of parenting. And the nature of growth and development as a child now is more complex than ever, with all the different avenues to where time can go that are like very negative. The more you are there, the better it can be, the better it will be. And as a high school teacher of 5 or 6 years now, I can tell you almost every single time, the more the parent is involved, the better the kid is. And obviously, if you only have one parent, then it makes it, you know, twice as hard, if not way harder to do than a two-parent household, or a community, even better, the community. You know, I have a lot of students who are basically almost 90 of my favorite students who I think are the best, not don't just have their parents around them, they have grandparents and cousins and all these other people, and it's a very strong bond going on. And having that community aspect can kind of make up partially for, achieving in other areas. But once again, we are more disconnected than ever. Most of you guys are not living, on the same block as your parents. And so, what are some of these double binds you're going to have to make? Well, you're going to have to start saying no a lot, almost no to everything. If you want to be an achiever, if you want to be great, because once again, you're thousands of hours behind schedule. And so you're going to have to make that up and then continue the schedule going forward. And so how are you going to get there? And one way that you can get there faster actually is to model other authors. The biggest breakthroughs I've made as a thinker, as an athlete, as even a husband, and so many other things is following the advice, almost modeling other people's system that they use. And then eventually, after I kind of learn it, then I kind of integrate it with what I'm already doing. And I have a free PDF that includes over 100 of David Foster Wallace's favorite books and the 3 books he always had with them while he was writing. And that link is down in the description below. And 12 years ago, when I did all the research and figured David Foster Wallace's favorite books out and bought a bunch of them, it helped me take quantum leaps in terms of my writing and reading game because I got exposed to people who I never would have before. And that's kind of the point of university. But I always ask, who the hell is exposing you to new things? Because I've been in classes and I'm like, okay, this professor who has never really achieved anything is showing me and exposing me to new things, but anything that is new is new. And so how good is this new content? And most of the time, it's really not worth it. And there's not a cohesive system behind it. And Wallace really helps us capitalize on the maximalist system with a lot of what he's into, because in the 21st century, our brains mostly function in a maximalistic way. And in modern writing, what we're trying to do really is now the blend of minimalism and maximalism. We've kind of moved past just being able to do one. And as an author, you have to be able to almost fluctuate, sometimes within the same chapter with characters between these two different styles. And one could call this kind of controlling the pace and good sentence structure. But obviously, it's much more complicated than that. And you have to be proficient, if not a master, in both minimalism and maximalism. And Cormac McCarthy is much more on the minimalistic side, even though he kind of has this aggressive prose. A lot of the time, in terms of his characterization, with the lack of interiority and whatnot, he's a minimalist. Same with a lot of other authors I like. But then on the maximalist side, who is the best? Obviously, Pynchon and Wallace and others. But we don't know Pynchon's favorite books. We know hundreds of Wallace's books, favorite books. And so once again, I would recommend modeling to be able to take shortcuts to kind of catching up in terms of time, because a lot of these authors didn't have that access. And if they did, for instance, David Foster Wallace at the University of Arizona, he was with professors he didn't like. And digital technology and stuff wasn't around yet, so they couldn't figure out what the best books were. So returning to the first idea, you're going to have to say no to almost everything because you're going to have to catch up on time. And you're really going to have to control your schedule and put yourself first. If you are working a job that is taxing to you, if you have a family that is taxing on you, you're going to have to rearrange the situation. You're going to have that hard conversation with your wife, with your husband, about taking a job for less money. I know that there's a fan out there of the program who's published a book and it got moderate success. When I saw it on Amazon, it had over like 1,000 reviews and some nice big companies reviewed it online that I saw. And so I assume it made this author, tens of thousands of dollars, if not more. But he told me that he's now working in a gas station at like graveyard shift because he can grind out his writing because nothing's going on. But his wife really doesn't see it because, probably a lot of that money ran out. And so now he's not really making any money, but he's continuing his writing dreams. And most of us are way behind that. Most of you guys have not published a book that's gotten, some critical acclaim yet. And so there's 2 different ways to look at this. And I would recommend taking a more broad view because grinding out, a nighttime job is an easy, quick fix, right? But you're looking at, as an author, to become great, a fix that's going to take decades. And so I would actually focus on some different things. I would focus on getting high-level skills that either for money or that will benefit your career in the long run. For instance, maybe becoming a freelancer in something. If you're really committed to writing, you don't want to get into content creation or networking, even if you do, but getting into something like copywriting or video editing or some form of job that will pay you well, that you'll be able to work at home from, not have to have necessarily a boss at, but that's going to pay you a lot more than being a security guard or a gas station attendant or an Uber driver. Something that you can reasonably learn in under a year, hopefully. Maybe a little bit more time. And once again, that will pay you more than some of these other jobs and let you be able to stay at home. Because if you have to work 40 hours a week or even 30 hours a week to stay afloat at a gas station job and to be able to pay your bills and live, not this terrible impoverished life, even if you're just sharing a room in an apartment, that number could go down to 15 hours if you got a better skill. And there is no vertical scaling or upward mobility in a gas station attendant job. But if you kind of get a freelancing job that does pay more in terms of your skill level, then you can obviously keep, raising the bar in terms of your pricing as you gain more of a reputation and all these other things. And if you're already working a job, for instance, and this is where, see, these are where these big decisions, these big double binds come in. What are you going to do? And obviously, every situation is different. If you have a complicated situation and you have these double binds right now, let me know down below. Like, what are you sacrificing? What are your options right now? But returning to Wallace, Wallace learned this concept of the double bind when he was back as an athlete. You could even say viewing his parents as professors who obviously had to sacrifice a lot to be able to reach their respective positions. But as an athlete, you learn, you get in what you put, you get out what you put in. And you're going to have to sacrifice part of your high school experience and a lot of other things to be able to be a good athlete. And the higher you get and the better you get, the more you're not going to be able to go out with your friends and party unless you're like super talented and all these different things. And Wallace, who I don't feel was athletically talented, started to feel this. He started to understand what it takes to achieve. And then when he went to Amherst, he put these massive expectations on himself. And from what I could tell, he never really had that steady of a girlfriend during any of his time during university. He did have some love interests and stuff, but they were massively complicated because he had two mental breakdowns while he was at university because of the pressure he was putting on himself to be this kind of philosophical genius. He was seen as this prodigy in terms of philosophy. That's how he got into the Harvard School of Graduate School for Philosophy. They only accept anywhere from 7 to 10 people a year into that program, which is absolutely insane. You know how competitive that must be? And Wallace got into it after having taken years off from school in general and getting an MFA and kind of going on this really weird streak. And so accepting him into the program showed his previous strength. And once again, repeating kind of that cycle, he had a mental breakdown and didn't finish his graduate school at Harvard. He only lasted like a month or two. And he was also sacrificing his health during this time because to fuel his ability as a fiction writer is actually how he started to get addicted to drugs and alcohol, because alcohol, really the weed is what started his fiction writing. He felt that weed opened him up emotionally because he was somewhat autistic and a little too logical to be able to write really good fiction. And his alcoholism started to kind of get out of control as a means to control the pressure and the expectations he was putting on himself. It was also around this time that he started getting deeper into SSRIs because of his depression, and that eventually led to his suicide. And so a lot of writers say this. A lot of writers will tell you that you have to make a massive sacrifice in terms of your health to become a great author. This is why guys like Don DeLillo and Haruki Murakami write for 8 hours or so every day, which is insane. And then they go on a 6-mile run. And you just, once again, have to look at these writers' routines. Either these writers are somewhat healthy, like a Haruki Murakami or Don DeLillo, and have a lot of clarity, or they write all day and are a little bit more social. They're having a family and doing all those things, or like going out and partying and kind of being more of that type of writer. And obviously, eventually, this all led to Wallace becoming a full-blown addict and having to go into recovery. And eventually, Wallace gets sober, but he starts grinding out Infinite Jest. And this was a massive sacrifice with him too. And around this time, this is where he was stalking, I think her name is Mary, stalking and womanizing all these different people and just kind of going crazy and acting like a total jerk, not just to these women, but to friends, to his mother. And he was having a lot of problems. And eventually he settled into his teaching position at the U of I and had a little bit of money and security for the first time in his life. And this is where the double binds kind of stop to end, because he publishes Infinite Jest and makes a bunch of money. He starts to achieve fame, and he kind of has this slew of nonfiction essay jobs that can kind of keep the money rolling in. Eventually, he gets his fellowship at Pomona that pays him 6 figures a year to teach, I think, one class a year and just be a good writer. And so that's a great gig to have. But this is where the pressure starts to creep in again because he turns off the heat a little bit. He just no longer has this chip on his shoulder because, Broom of the System was received all right, but didn't get the most positive reception. And The Girl with the Curious Hair kind of went over everybody's head. I'm rereading that collection right now and reading kind of the critical reviews of it. And Wallace was very upset that people didn't view it as this kind of cohesive book that was kind of showing off all these different styles that Wallace was able to do, and and that's what I talked about in my last video, that he is kind of a connoisseur in terms of writing ability and being able to stretch himself. But no one else really caught that, and instead kind of focused on these individual stories and didn't really get that much coverage of them. And so as we're moving forward, he doesn't have the ability anymore to write like he was doing in Infinite Jest or like even his old short stories. And this lessening ability created a lot of problems for Wallace because he was feeling happier than ever. The reason he got off of his antidepressants was not because he was depressed, but rather he was feeling happier than he had ever felt before. He was, I think, close to, I think he quit cigarettes and was eating better and had a healthy sleep routine and exercise routine and was starting to write really well again and really thought he was going to be able to get off these things. And so we were at this double bind scenario, though, because for Wallace to finally get over this hurdle, because there's almost two inverse binds happening, because he felt that if he could finally get off these SSRIs, he'd be able to become a great writer. But he was maybe trying to up the stakes a little bit because he never wrote great while he was happy. Everything that he wrote before was in these terrible states. And so I wonder in my heart if maybe that decision was actually just a double bind to get away from writing forever, that he was just going to be happy and ride off into the sunset. And if he would have been able to get off of SSRIs, I think his life would actually have been very plentiful. Because when we look at his compatriots, guys like Jonathan Franzen and Bret Easton Ellis and all those guys, they've had moderately successful careers. They've written some books, had some attention. They're not legends in the game, but Wallace is much more likable, much more knowledgeable, and would have done much better in the modern podcasting environment than they ever would have done. He would have created so much fascination and held such power in terms of his opinion on all these polarizing topics and the essays he'd be writing. Imagine a David Foster Wallace essay on Donald Trump. It would be wild. And so his life would have been good. And I think he was maybe seeing that he didn't need to write. He didn't need to achieve anymore. And this is what I kind of want to conclude with, that the double binds that we put ourselves in most of the time. I kind of went on this whole thing with you guys, that to be a great author and to be a great parent, you need to say no and get in these double binds, but they actually don't exist, you guys. That the pecking order and this capitalistic system and these constraints that we put ourselves in are actually really terrible for us. And non-ambition, in my opinion, is the way. When I'm looking at my own writing career, this is why I love Chinese poetry, wilderness poetry, nature poetry, because there is no one I need to be. There is no benchmark for me to achieve because, first of all, no one reads nature poetry. And second of all, that's the whole point of the genre. And this is why sometimes I'm a little bit turned off by fiction and don't care as much as I used to about like writing fiction and like achieving these fiction writer dreams, because it's all just laced in ambition, in unhealthiness. And for a long time, writing was about tapping into the soul, about changing other people's lives and moving them with your writing. And you don't need to be an expert to be able to do that. Maybe at a massive level, because now everyone's a judger. Even guys like me, I'm like, oh, that sucks. But if I read something and it's well done and it's well thought out and it's not the most ambitious thing, if I recognize the person has skill and merit and they are doing something cool and in their own way, then I get it. But to be able to do that, you can live a non-ambitious life and write and continue to grow and be able to produce works like that. But I actually feel like that's maybe harder than like doing the grinding out method. Just relaxing and thinking about it in a 20 to 30 year timeline, telling yourself, hey, I'll probably be pretty good in 30 years. But maybe I'm going to publish online. I don't care what the critics say. That's pretty hard. But I think that would breed innovativeness, because a lot of the short stories and novels that random fans send me, I can automatically sense, first of all, they're not anywhere as good as anything on my bookshelf, but they also, even if they maybe aren't as good in that regard, they don't have that kind of innovativeness. They don't have that authentic feel to it. It just kind of feels like someone wanted to be a writer and always thought that they could. And it feels like open mic night at the bar. but with a much bigger time commitment because, I go listen to a couple songs, it takes 20 minutes. But reading a 200,000 word novel someone sends me, that's going to take 6 hours, if not really 8, 9, 10 hours. And so I'm giving you guys a double bind right here. You could focus on that grind. You could put those 10,000 hours in and force your way through. Or you could write some stuff that will change people's lives, but you're not going to be able to care. You're going to have to lose all your ambition. And one of my favorite Robert Bly poems goes, "How strange to think of giving up all ambition. Suddenly I see with such clear eyes the white flake of snow that has just fallen in the horse's mane." And what he's saying there is that once you lose ambition, you're able to see like Rilke, like the greatest authors of all time, because we have filters on our reality. We are functioning mostly through these weird objective models of reality based in self-preservation and capitalism and all these other things that were ingrained in us by the trauma inflicted upon us by our parents and by the public school system and all this other crap. And, what we think we need to do to get women and yada, yada, yada. But once you remove all that and start to see clearly, you're able to actually write something that is an accurate perception of reality, or maybe even channel something from above or below. And so I'm asking you right now to come with me on this non-ambitious journey. Don't take the other side of the double bind. Don't grind your life out for no reason. That's not okay. The future, everyone, is a massive push of published works that are high level. We're going to be focusing on sentence structure. We're not going to put out some shit to everybody. But what we're going to do is take what the beats we're doing to the next level. Jack Kerouac and Gary Snyder, we'll just keep it on Kerouac here. And he wasn't a great writer. He had some good stories. You feel the soul in his work. But I want to bring something deeper to writing. And I think that we can get there once we start to remove ambition. So if you want to come along with me, tell me down below. Tell me your plan. Tell me what you're struggling with right now and what you think about just relaxing. That's what Ray Bradbury's advice is. Don't think, relax, write. That's my advice to you right now also.